back in session. The House, of course, live here, gavel to gavel on C-SPAN, and the Senate is live on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. Now it's on to the first of 3 panels on education from the annual Arizona State University Global Silicon Valley Summit. This event brings together business leaders, educators, that is, and policymakers to look at education issues. This first panel looks at the work of the Khan Academy, which provides free online lessons.
My name is Campbell Brown. I am the co-founder and editor-in-chief of The 74, which is a new nonprofit news site that covers education that launched this year. I hope you all will check it out. And I have the great pleasure of introducing a couple of people, someone who probably needs no introduction, certainly not to this room. But Sal Khan is obviously the creator of Khan Academy. And Mark Hoplamazian is the president and CEO of Hyatt, and today we're going to talk a little bit about something that they're partnering together on. And we've got a video that'll give you a sense for it. We're going to show in just a second. But before we do that, Saul, why don't you start off by just explaining a little bit about what LearnStorm is?
Yeah, so those of y'all who are familiar with the Khan Academy, we're a not-for-profit, mission-free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And people often associate us primarily with these videos that we have, and that is part of Khan Academy. But we also have a really interactive exercise platform where students can learn at their own pace and learn standards-aligned skills. And what we realize is we need to think more about how do we get a broader segment of students engaged in this, and a broader segment of teachers engaged in it, where they can experiment with personalized learning, and they can really focus on mindset, on grit, perseverance, a lot of these things that we hear about. And so we piloted this thing called LearnStorm last year in the Bay Area, which is, I guess for lack of a better word, a learning challenge, where schools, teachers, students participate, and they are rewarded not just for achievements in math, but they're awarded for showing grit, perseverance. And you're like, well, how do you measure that? Well, we can see when a student is working on Khan Academy what level they're at. Are they challenging themselves? And maybe most importantly, how regularly do they use it? And what do they do when they get something wrong? Do they give up, or do they keep going? And that's a proxy for grit or resilience. And so we did that last year in the Bay Area, hoping to get maybe 1% of the eligible students ages 3rd through 12th grade participating. We got close to 10% participating. And a large segment was, I think it was 40% came from majority free and reduced lunch schools. And just by doing that, we saw more really high fidelity, personalized, blended learning implementations than we had seen in the previous 4 or 5 years. So that pilot we did with Google. And then the next year, which is this year, we said, well, can we expand it to some more geographies? And Chicago was really interesting to us because it is a truly urban area, large. There's the Chicago public school system, and then there's the surrounding areas. And we connected with Mark, and we saw that there was just a lot of kind of a kindred energy around that. And so we did LearnStorm this year in Chicago, the Bay Area with Google, in Idaho with the Albertsons Foundation. Idaho being interesting because it's a kind of a rural area where how do you reach people all over the state. And actually we did in Ireland as well, the country of Ireland, and we could talk more about why we did that. But but this year it's been pretty incredible. We just finished the last phases of LearnStorm. We're going to have the physical finals events, but we saw in these geographies between 10 and 15% of all 3rd to 12th graders in these major urban areas or even states or even countries participate. So it's pretty exciting.
Mark, before I go to you, why don't we show the video and let
Sure.
people get a sense for it. Take a look.
We are the inaugural group to bring LearnStorm to all of the students in Chicagoland.
It's based on this idea that if you provide the right resources and you have enough determination, you can learn anything.
So the whole spirit of LearnStorm is we have the tools where you can practice a growth mindset, so now you can build it. LearnStorm 2016 kicking off tomorrow. You guys will have opportunities to do and be whatever you put your mind to.
There's no real limit to learning. That is, when the bell goes off at the beginning of the day or the end of the day or at the beginning of the year or the end of the year, your opportunity to learn does not end.
We could have asked for a better launch to begin with because the energy in the room was amazing. One of the things that's true is once you engage in these courses and this challenge, LearnStorm, it gives you energy.
I think people look to Chicago as a leader. And so I think we're going to be able to do LearnStorm here like no other place. And I think it's going to set an amazing example for the rest of the country and maybe the world.
And I say learn, you say storm. Learn, storm, learn, storm.
Okay, that was a pep rally.
Lots of sizzle.
So why was this interesting to you? Why did you want to pursue this partnership?
Thanks. So first and foremost, welcome to the Grand Hyatt San Diego, and thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. This actually started off in a very unusual way. What we were finding is that around the world, so many of our teams in different places, Brazil, India, and several cities in the United States, were finding that we were having great success in bringing people in to the hospitality industry out of really disadvantaged backgrounds, people who were disengaged or disconnected from either school or jobs. We have a magnificent opportunity to bring people in with very limited skills and then help them grow. And so our idea was, we wondered how we could actually craft some life skills in a distributed format and make it available to a large number of people, that we could scale that and try to facilitate bringing more people in from these communities into the workforce, not just to work at Hyatt, but more broadly. So we immediately thought of Khan Academy because what we were concerned about is this is a community of people. I heard in your last session that 36 million people who in the United States. Arnie Duncan last night said half of the black male population between 17 and 24 in Chicago is either not in school and or not working. So it's a large community of people, and in order to sort of provide them with resources and skills, you have to do it in a way that is not only accessible to them, but also something that they could embrace, and that is not demeaning, and it's something that's truly engaging in a really authentic way. And so we immediately thought of Khan Academy because the ethos of Khan Academy is brilliant at delivering that kind of real, authentic engagement, and one that is not perfect. It's authentic, but authenticity beats perfection every time. So we approached Sal, and when we sat down, we had this long discussion about empathy and how that was built into how they designed what they did, and authenticity. And we realized that this actually had broader application. LearnStorm, one of the key points of LearnStorm is this grit, perseverance element, this growth mindset. We've been working on design thinking at Hyatt for years and trying to expand that, and a growth mindset is essential to actually practicing that. So the connection between what they were promoting through LearnStorm and what we were working on within the company was aligned, and we had common view about mission. So we said, look, we want to actually, longer term, we do want to turn to building these resources out for skills development, life skills. But in the meantime, this is super powerful, so we would love to help you and partner with you to bring LearnStorm to Chicago. And the scalability of it is also quite stunning. And we saw the effect of that in Chicago. And Chicago is in a place right now where more engagement is absolutely necessary.
So I was going to say that Chicago public schools have been struggling. Certainly recently we've heard all about the problems. How did that affect your thinking about doing this and sort of urgently, both of you, focusing on Chicago? And it just wrapped up April 1st, right?
Yes, it did. I would say it provided me with a sense of real resolve. I would also add quickly that the first step that we took was to really enlist City Hall and the districts, not just Chicago Public Schools, because this was 5 counties around Chicago, the enthusiasm and the optimism for what impact this could have was unbelievable. So I think the senior leadership was immediately supportive and said, this is exactly what, the right time for this. Yes, there were all sorts of headlines about lots of fiscal issues and lots of conflict within the district, Chicago Public School District in particular, which is one of the reasons why they believed that this was a great thing to do and a great time to do it. The head of CPS in particular is very focused on personalized paths for learning, and he recognized actually how powerful LearnStorm and the Khan platform is towards that.
And you both mentioned growth mindset. Maybe just explain for a minute, just in case there's anybody here who doesn't understand the idea, and then talk a little bit about how you integrated that into LearnStorm.
Yeah, growth mindset, it got popularized with the research of Carol Dweck at Stanford. And it's this idea that, broadly speaking, in a given dimension, people have one of two mindsets. They either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. A fixed mindset, say in math, says, well, I either have the math gene or I don't, while a growth mindset says, well, I don't know what my potential is. The only way I'm going to achieve it is if I keep stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm willing to fail. I embrace that failure, and I keep going. And multiple studies have shown successful people in whatever field disproportionately have a growth mindset. They're the ones that are always stepping out of their comfort zone and pushing themselves. And that by itself is only mildly interesting, except for the fact that Carol Dweck, in her research, Angela Duckworth, she's done studies on grit, which is a related idea at University of Pennsylvania. They've shown that you can actually do interventions with people to take them from having a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And we've been studying this on the Khan Academy platform for several years now. We actually had a partnership with Carol Dweck and her Pertz lab at Stanford, where we started doing some small mini growth mindset interventions while students were doing math exercises on Khan Academy, reminding them your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Or you're more likely to form neural connections when you get a question wrong and reflect than when you get a question right. And we saw even there a significant increase in engagement from students. And so one of the key things that we've always thought about is, at Khan Academy, we are building a platform where people can tap into their potential, where they literally can learn anything that they want to learn, especially in some of these core academic subjects. But how do we get more students to have the right mindset so they take advantage of these things? Some of those studies with Carol Dweck got us along those thinking. We said, if we could tie together the virtual, the physical, partner with key stakeholders, whether it's industry, teachers, districts, parents, and create a community groundswell around mindset and learning, and not just talk about it, but give them something to do around it that's actually tied to what matters. The work that these students are doing, they're doing Common Core exercises, but they don't it's fun.
It is fun.
And Mark actually did a significant amount. We've looked at the data. But it is, I mean, I encourage everyone here to try it. I mean, the exercises are always available, even outside of LearnStorm. But it's a game where you're learning Common Core mathematics at your own time and pace. If you're a 9th grader and you have to remediate your 6th grade math, you don't have to feel ashamed, no stigma around it. You can work on that, and you will get credit for LearnStorm, especially if you're showing grit and perseverance. If you're an advanced student who's 2 or 3 year grade levels ahead, you can be in that same thing, and you can work on that, and you're all working together, and your school gets credit. So there's as a community, how much grit and resilience did your classroom show? And so, the growth mindset, this is, one way to think about LearnStorm is we've done it in 4 regions now. We're hoping to do it in many more, possibly nationwide next year, is a nationwide growth mindset intervention, where you could literally, if we could move the dial in the number of people in the country, and maybe one day the world, that actually have a growth mindset, that actually directly, I think, will measurably address even some of the things that Ted was talking about in the last panel.
I would just add quickly, so this was designed, obviously, to enlist students. And it's remarkable. I think the final tally is around 100,000 students in the 5 counties around Chicago were engaged in the competition, which is absolutely remarkable. But we decided, with Sal's sort of instigation maybe and support, to actually launch LearnStorm as a competition within Hyatt. So now we actually released it and ran a competition within the company. So then we had over 5,000 participants signed up quickly, and we ran through sort of the several-week period. And what came out of that was just absolutely unexpectedly inspirational. I got notes from colleagues of mine one in particular in Lake Tahoe who said she always had struggled with algebra when she was in school. She sort of squeaked by with a C. It would always bothered her that she didn't have that skill. And when she saw what was available, she realized she could do it at her own pace and that, and learn, but also push herself. And she was, unleashed. She basically felt like she was able to accomplish something and take it to the next level. We had another colleague who's a single father whose daughter was having problems with math, and he didn't feel enabled to actually help tutor her. And through the exposure that he saw through LearnStorm, he actually introduced Khan's, the platform to his daughter, and he's now tutoring her with Khan's help. And so these are the kinds of things that I think are also, they're deeply emotionally important and inspirational and really meaningful. But in all cases, based on the design, it really promotes going back and not just recognizing that failures are part of the process, but going back and applying yourself more and more to those areas. And it's been amazing to see that come to life for adults, in addition to the children that were impacted by the program.
Let me ask you to take a step back a little bit as a global CEO. I mean, both of you as global CEOs. What do you see as sort of the most urgent, pressing thing, challenge in education that in your mind this addresses? I mean, and that you're dealing with, whether it's through hiring and what's happening in the workplace, and that what you're seeing as well.
I would say much more focused on learning, not so much education per se, in the sense that it's not an educational system. It's really the learning process that I think we're focusing our time and attention on. Increasingly, in every market in which we operate, we've got 650 hotels in 52 countries, 100,000 colleagues around the world. And what we see is that the opportunity gap, the skills gap, the knowledge gap, and the income gap that results from all of that is alive and well everywhere and widening everywhere, every single market that we're in. It's particularly pronounced in a few markets in which we've really focused a lot of attention on how we're going about recruiting from disadvantaged areas. Brazil and India are two areas that we've spent a lot of time on, pulling especially young girls out of the favelas and out of slums and trying to give them an opportunity to sort of learn some skills and get a job and then develop from there. And so we see that as the #1 issue that we think we can make an impact on in the world. It happens that our industry is well suited to that because we've got great entry-level opportunities. And with the help of partners like Khan Academy, I think we can bring great tools and resources to bear. But what I'm also learning is, as we did this in Chicago, there's a great community of people involved in new learning models and new engagement models. And we discovered that this was really a broad community effort. We had the library system, we had local institutions, we had obviously the districts and superintendents. This is also an innovation that Sal's team came up with. They created this corps of ambassadors. And the ambassadors were teachers who were particularly passionate about this, who sort of spread the word and spread their passion for this. And so it took very much a community effort to bring this together and make it effective. And of course, some key people in the district. And what we're seeing is that there's an opportunity now to create more of an ecosystem that covers not just kids, but also young adults who are, they're out of the school system and they're out of jobs, and they're out of the workforce. And there's got to be a vehicle, a way for us to re-engage them. And the tools and resources that Khan has got, and this visibility to how you could actually assemble an ecosystem that would make that effective to pull people back in through learning and also through linking it to a job opportunity is a big, big opportunity, I think.
Sal?
Yeah, well, I think as a society we have a kind of almost an existential question in front of us. The labor model or the workforce model that we have today is an artifact of the industrial age, where kind of the pyramid, and it worked, where you had a large need for labor. There's kind of an in-between layer of information processing, kind of a lot of white-collar jobs, and at the top you had you could say your creative class or your owners of capital. These are the people who owned enterprises, the entrepreneurs, the researchers, the artists, things like that. And the one thing that's clear, the writing's on the wall, and I think this is contributing to some of the wage gap and the inequality that we're seeing over the last several years, is automation is making labor, for sure, less relevant. It started without, offshoring, where you go from high-cost areas to low-cost, but then you're going to get to robots, where even, what are those people going to do even in low-cost areas? And then even information processing, which is kind of that middle layer of, white-collar jobs. That's, computers are really good at that, and you're starting to see artificial intelligence start to kind of really hit its stride. And so society has a question, well, those bottom two layers are going to, even though our aggregate productivity is increasing, those bottom two layers are getting collapsed. And so what do we do with all that increased productivity? Does it just accrue to that top layer, and then do we have to, redistribute all of it in some way? Or do you do what I think is the more aspirational thing, I think we can do it, is invert that pyramid in some way. You get many, many more people into that ability to be entrepreneurs, to be creative, to exercise that creativity. And the only way we're going to be able to do it is to educate many, many, many more people at scale. A thought experiment that I give a lot of times, especially even within our team, is if you were to go back 400 years in the past to Western Europe, which even then was one of the more educated parts of the world, you would see that about 15% of people knew how to read. And if you asked a monk or a member of the clergy, what percentage, someone who could read, what percentage of the population do you think is even capable of reading? They would have said, oh, well, with a perfect education system, maybe 40% or 50%. But you fast forward today, that would have been a wildly pessimistic prediction, that is pretty close to 100%, and that's a byproduct of, the industrial age public education system, et cetera, et cetera. But now today is, this question of this pyramid. If I were to ask anyone in this room, what percentage of people do you think are capable of being in that top of the pyramid? What percentage of people are capable of conducting research, or starting an ed tech company, or being an investor, or an artist, or whatever it might be? I suspect a lot of people in this room would say, well, maybe 10% with a great education system, maybe 20%. But my personal belief, and we're starting to see data in Khan Academy through things like LearnStorm, is if you allow people to learn at their own pace, if you allow them to fill in their gaps, and they don't hit that wall in algebra because they had that weakness in negative numbers, and they don't hit that wall in calculus because of that weakness in algebra, that I actually think it's a much, much larger percentage of the population that is capable of learning quantum physics, or contributing to genetics research, or a cure for the next disease. And I don't think it's just like a nice to have, something that sounds good. I do fundamentally think this pyramid is, this inversion of it is an existential question for society over the next 10 or 20 years. Credentialing
is something that you guys, we talked about it earlier, are thinking a lot about. You're working on it. Talk a little bit about that and what it means for your business too.
Well, education is at least two, maybe three things. There's the learning part of education, getting the skills. Then there's the how do you show proof of your skills to the world? And then you could also argue there might be almost a kind of a socialization. How do you learn to work with other people in your community? But that credentialing piece is key. I think a lot of structural unemployment, there is a skills gap, but I also think there's a signaling gap. And I think a lot of people have the skills, or they're close, but it's very hard for them to prove that they have the critical thinking or the writing or the interpersonal skills to plug into that new career. And so something that we aren't doing yet, but when we talk to folks like Hyatt and other partners, we were just talking to another one of our supporters, AT&T, earlier this morning, about exactly this issue. How do we get a world where, through Khan Academy and through a lot of the efforts that everyone in this room is doing, how do people start to prove what they know? And employers that employ a lot of people at all different levels recognize that and start to use that and bring them into the workforce.
So something specific you want to talk about on that front, or no? Not yet.
It's early.
Early, okay.
It's early. But interestingly, one of the first times that we got together and we were talking through a number of different issues, including the primaries, as I recall, and authenticity and how it shows up in the primary season. That was an interesting discussion. We won't go there. So one of the things that Sal immediately identified was this issue about the fact that there's a disconnection in signaling and credential, because I was explaining to him that we were supporting and a part of the 100,000 Opportunities Initiative, which is an initiative that was really kicked off by Howard Schultz's foundation, now being sort of run by the Aspen Institute to enlist big employers to pull what they're referring to as opportunity youth. The same population that Arnie Duncan referred to last night and then we talked about earlier, into the workforce. And so I described the first engagement that we had the first event to Sal, which was, a few thousand people in Chicago came to a job fair basically with the bigger employers that were a part of the 100,000 Opportunities effort. And what I explained to Sal was, my colleagues who were there interviewing people met a large number of young people who they thought could make really, that they believed could be great entry-level employees in hospitality because of how they presented themselves and what they were able to bring to bear. But to a person, my colleague said there's zero chance that we would have ever interviewed them because they've got no resume. There's nothing to look at. And immediately he said, well, there's got to be a different way to think about a credential than a high school diploma or some other kind of institutional evidence of success or evidence of completion. And I agree with that. I think the challenge right now, the other thing that Sal had an idea around was if you actually had a network of these kinds of employers, and one of those employers, let's say it was Walmart that met that, a young person who they thought had a great opportunity, if they actually credentialed that person or designated them as someone that they would qualify as someone that they would interview for a job, that we could look to that as a proxy for our own credential, and then we could, in effect, enable a group of people to be now in that flow of interviews and job opportunities. So I think this is a very important element to this, because the population of people who are disconnected from school at this point, but also disconnected from the workforce, there's got to be a path, and it's going to be a different path. And I think that there are a number of credentialing ideas, some of which I think link directly to Khan Academy and its platform, but maybe even broader than that around life skills.
I have to ask you, Khan Academy's been enormously successful. You've made huge strides. You've been at this for how many years?
Well, it depends when I started tutoring my cousins 12 years ago. The domain name Khan Academy, this was about 10 years ago. And then I set it up as a not-for-profit in 2008. And 2009 is when I quit my former career to do this.
To do this full time. As much progress as you've made on this front, do you think anything you've done or are doing is going to fundamentally change public education in K through 12? And if not, you've got this room full of people, you've got governors, Bill Gates, I mean, all these great minds. What do we have to do to get at that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, some things have happened actually far faster than I would have expected, and then some things not as fast as all of us would hope. The things that have happened faster is, there's a lot of ed tech investors here. Prior to 2008, 2009, people didn't think that there was ed tech was almost the third rail of venture capital investing. But Khan Academy and others started to show that there's a hunger. That, students are out there trying to fill in their gaps. They're willing to, on their own time, try to pull it. And it was happening at scale, and it continues to really grow dramatically. So we've seen that. We've definitely seen the conversation. Ed schools have been teaching about differentiated instruction forever. But now we're starting to say, wait, the tools are starting to exist where this is very doable. LearnStorm, we're having large fractions of populations of these regions doing personalized instruction in a way that 20 years ago would have seemed like science fiction, where people are able to learn at their own pace. The classroom changes, so it's not lecture-based anymore. It's much more about one-on-one or small group instruction, very, very, very focused on individual students. The fact that we could even engage regions in this way is pretty incredible. One of the things that I've been almost every night, I think more dots get connected. This partnership with the College Board. The College Board, they're the creators of the SAT. And the SAT has been around or the College Board has been around for almost 100 years. And the new president, for the first time, recognized, look, there's this whole industry that unlevels the playing field around test prep. And they reached out to us. They had seen a lot of the work we had done around the Common Core, around kind of the adaptive, personalized learning. And they said, would you be willing to do something like that for SAT that makes it free? And we've always been careful to even use the word SAT prep, because SAT prep in the past has been around tricks or how do you just, game the exam, but they wanted to work with us because we were about real learning. That if you're having trouble with that algebra problem, no, you can still learn it, or you can remediate and go back to your arithmetic or whatever. So we've been working with them on that, and we just launched it this past SAT administration was the first time. 50% of all students who took the SAT used it. We've already seen a 20% reduction in test prep, paid test prep. We've seen the usage was even across all demographics, income and ethnic, so much higher penetration than we expected. We've partnered with the Boys and Girls Club, so we make sure that everyone has access to it. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is we now have integration with the PSAT. The PSAT is what 80% of American 10th graders take, and now if they give permission, it's very important they give permission, they give permission to Khan Academy that PSAT can now act as a diagnostic for personalized learning. So one of the hardest problems in personalized learning is how do you actually know what the gaps are in students' knowledge? And now you have this really high fidelity thing where we can say, hey, you were really strong at the functions concept, but you're weak in this type of grammar and you're strong in this type of reading comprehension. And we can immediately personalize that for the students. And then we can see how that affects them when they take the SAT and maybe even further on when they go to college. So, a lot of what I just said is, I think, even to myself 5 years ago would have felt like science fiction. What I'm excited going forward is really leveraging these multiple platforms, partnering with many people in this room. It's obviously going to be a collective effort here. But I actually think in 10 to 15 years, which isn't a long time in the whole scheme of things, we will have a world where if you're in the developing world and you don't have access to a school, through a smartphone or a tablet, you can literally self-educate, prove what you know, and then plug in to meaningful careers. And if you are in the world most of us live in, you will be able to supercharge what's happening in the classroom, where instead of these paper books that weigh 20 pounds and don't personalize to you, you're going to have resources that not only allow you to get your core skills at your own time and pace, you're going to be able to have labs, you're going to create portfolios, and class time is going to be freed for more human interaction, and that those artifacts, these portfolios, are going to give us even richer information for the people that we want to work, we want to fund, we want to, and allow more people to enter that top of that pyramid.
Yeah, I was just going to add two things. One is one of the amazing leverageable aspects of Khan is that the platform is, you can build skills on your own, and then free up classroom time to truly engage. I see a very clear, direct corollary to our business. We're trying to actually take the administration out of our colleagues' hands so that they're not stuck sitting there doing administrative tasks in front of a guest, but actually provide them with resources so they can engage authentically and in an empathetic way with our guests. Same thing happens in the classroom, but you need the tools to be able to do that. In our case, we're building a platform to sort of take all of the administrative burden off of their plate so that they can authentically engage. In the Khan Academy case, you can learn a lot of these things on your own, core skills, and then when you get to class, it can be more project-based, it can be more active and engaged. I think that's super powerful, both in a work context and in a school context. The other thing is, you talked about it earlier today, agency. Just being able to take more control over your own path and your own growth and your own learning, which, I mean, it's got obvious benefits, but it's also, there's something deeply sort of respectful of the human spirit when you do that, when you put that in someone's hands. And it often bolsters your self-confidence. And I just think it makes a big difference from an emotional perspective in terms of how you experience learning and how you build confidence over time. So I think that's the special gift embedded in what he's built, because that's really an emotional connection that those kids will carry with them forever. And I think that really enables amazing things in the future.
We just have a couple of minutes left, so let me maybe have you both comment, in closing, on how important the public-private partnership is, and going forward, especially, and then where you see LearnStorm going. You mentioned Ireland. What are the longer-term goals?
Well, Ireland's interesting because to some degree, the precursor for LearnStorm started there as one of our board members. He's a reality TV show star in Ireland, and he did kind of a precursor, and we said, that's a good idea. But yeah, we are in the works right now of figuring out how do we get this into more regions, how do we get the go nationwide, and we want to work with districts, we want to work with teachers, and we want to work with corporate partners to make this literally, can you imagine, like a nationwide growth mindset intervention, change culture around learning. So that's key to us, and this public-private or not NGO, for-profit, corporate partnership is key. We're not for profit. We're funded by philanthropy and partnerships like this, and it isn't just the financial resources that just allow us to build Khan Academy and do things like that. It's the expertise, it's the know-how. It's if we can start connecting you learning on Khan Academy to authentic career paths in industry and things like that, then that really starts to take us to where the future needs to go.
Mark?
Yeah, I would just say this whole experience with Sal and his team has been inspirational, and it's been a very personal one for me personally, but also for so many members of my team. And I think one of the reasons we found so much meaning in it is because we as an organization are very purpose-driven. Our purpose is to care for people so they can be their best, and we felt that our support of LearnStorm and of Sal's organization helps care for people in a very, very explicit way. And it certainly propels them and enables them to be their best. So for us, it was a fulfillment of our purpose. But I do think that this sense of perspective, what Sal described earlier, and the reality on the ground of what's going on with workforce and with young people who are disenfranchised at this point, is certainly a huge motivator. And I think it's necessary for employers and enablers and tool providers, but also institutions, to actually align around what is the design principle that we're going to align around, and what's the impact that you really want to have. The one thing that Sal's demonstrated is that you can scale impact enormously, so the scalability has been demonstrated, and also the impact has been super deep. So it's a great model.
Sal, Mark, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.